Hello, good evening, and welcome to Iron Port here on Metropolitan Television. Iron Port is proudly brought to you by the Ghana Revenue Authority, GOIL PLC, Serene Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, Indeed, Meridian Port Services, and the latest kid on the block, Phoenix Insurance Company Limited. The show is proudly powered by the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, GPHA, and our media partner on this journey of a lifetime is the Business and Financial Times, the BNFT. If you want to have a grasp of all that transpired on the show tonight, make a date and grab the Thursday edition of the BNFT, and you'll be able to see all that happened here on the show tonight. We are streaming live on our social media pages. On Facebook, we are streaming live at Ghana Port and Harbours Authority. Ghana Port and Harbours Authority. Still on Facebook, we are live at Port of Tema, and on YouTube, we are live at Iron Port. Indeed, we shall be getting interactive with you, and so all you have to do is send us your messages and comments via our dedicated WhatsApp line, which is 0559 177 0559 At the appropriate time, we shall be sharing them with the rest of the world and seeking some answers for you. And when the time is ripe, we shall activate the phone lines for you to call in and contribute to the discussion tonight. My name is Kennedy Mona. We are going for a quick break. When we return, we'll continue the show. Please do stay with us.
Every now and again, GOIL makes good things happen. This time, GOIL has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with GOIL Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. GOIL has that sorted. GOIL, good energy.
Electricity, pay your taxes. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is. You still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse.
Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risk Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse, and my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance motor policy. Currently, my goods are on the high seas covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance.
Oh, Ajima,
tell him more.
As a road contractor,
I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance
for the projects and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
MPS Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
Business and life can be like the sea sometimes serene, sometimes calm. sometimes turbulent, and at times it brings the unexpected. However it is like, trust Phoenix Insurance for your home, car, business, and marine insurance needs. Call 0302 246 319 or 0243 690 492.
At Phoenix, you experience a delightful service delivered with wisdom.
All right, so you're welcome back. We are now going to take a look at some happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. And indeed, in the course of the week, a new assessment that shows that there's some significant deficit in terms of transparency in the fisheries governance of our country came to light, and that was during the launch of a report by Semlos Africa, FITI, and indeed the Center for Coastal Management of the University of Cape Coast. Plus, the fact that the Ship Owners and Agents Association of Ghana, SOAAG, also clocked 30 years in the course of the week, and they had cause to celebrate with some stakeholders in the industry. And the GPHA is also very keen on occupational health and safety. We'll tell you what we know. Please do stay on as we bring you these stories and more.
The Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority was among corporate bodies that marked the World Day of Safety and Health at Work. The International Labour Organization sets aside April 28 each year for organizations to discuss the implications a safe, healthy working environment has for the world of work, as well as how to practically implement this right in the world of work. The various speakers at the gathering drummed home the essence of inculcating a culture of health and safety at the Port of Ghana.
Observing World Health and Safety Day, it means that we are indirectly observing the wealth of GPHA. If you don't have a healthy workforce, there's no way productivity would improve.
I will still emphasize that as we request for good incentive for workers, we should also encourage our colleagues at their workplaces to follow the best practices of safety.
We must also be part of the understanding of the SOLAS Convention. SOLAS basically is the safety of life at sea. That has its element right from the time the Titanic story began. And once we see there's no clear demarcation between the waterfront as far as the harbor and then the ocean is concerned, then it is important we understand these aspects.
As Happy Safety Day, it shouldn't just be a lunch, it should be a culture, it should be a lifestyle.
I would implore all of us to cultivate a safety attitude reserved not just for the workplace. It is much easier to embrace safety as a lifestyle where it is a priority, no matter what environment you find yourself in.
The Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority is dedicated to giving its staff the skills they need to succeed in the fiercely competitive and ever-evolving world of international trade. This is why the authority continually invests in the UNCTAD Train for Trade program to prepare future management staff to understand emerging challenges in the industry and how to find sustainable solutions to them. This year, 16 GPHA staff who partook in the training program become the first within the English-speaking network to graduate the 5th cycle of the program.
It's an industry that has changed tremendously in the last 5-10 years, and the base is super high. Now, you as the new participants, we give you this capacity, the skills and knowledge to this program, and now the aptitude you have demonstrated to take more responsibility. The stakes are high. Remember, you are in the industry that is national strategic asset for your country, for the region, because you provide support to landlocked country. So when you go back to the office now, you have your new mindset, please remember it every day in your task.
And since we began working with UNCTAD in this area, not just in Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, but across all other ports in our sub-region and Africa and widely in the developing world, we have come to appreciate the rich content, the practical nature of the UNCTAD Train for Trade, where you are not just learning theory, but seeing it in actual practice.
It is interesting to note that among the English-speaking network, Ghana is the one leading. We are now heading to Cycle 6. The likes of Nigeria, that is our big brother Nigeria, that we always compete with them, they are at Cycle 4. And you could see that There are other people from other networks who are here to observe how Ghana goes about it.
From the practical training that we got, I learned a lot from best practices in other ports, foreign ports for that matter.
The world is facing three major challenges with regards to climate change, loss of habitats and pollution. UNCTAD is one program that always reminds us of the need to align our port operations to the requirement of SDGs.
My dissertation was to investigate, or I investigated the impact of delays in the generation of oil and gas invoices at the port of Takoradi. And my objective was to actually identify the problem and then proffer solutions to it.
A recent finding indicates Ghana performs poorly in transparency when it comes to its marine fisheries sector. Specifically, the finding indicated that although data exists within Ghana's Fisheries Administration, majority of this data is not publicly accessible. This revelation came up during the report's launch of the Assessment of Online Transparency of Ghana's Fisheries Management Information, an initiative of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, FITI, and the Center for Maritime Law and Security, SEMLAWS Africa, with support from Bloomberg Philanthropies. During the launch, stakeholders within the fisheries sector gathered to evaluate the report and make recommendations for the future. Reacting to the report, the Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture Development, Moses Anim, said the ministry has taken note of the gaps and the recommendations outlined in the report and will take steps to address them.
We hope that FITI, SEMLAWS Africa, Bloomberg Philanthropies will work with the ministry and commission to implement the recommendations. I must add that this assessment report is a wake-up call to us to join the Fisheries Transparency Initiative.
The Executive Director of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, Sven Bierman, said the purpose of this report is to help lead Ghana's fisheries sector on a gradual upward trend towards transparency and sustainable development.
At the end of the day, why we need public access to information is to contribute to the better governance of fisheries. If you look at analysis, and there's a lot of research out there, and you see which of the fish stocks around the world are doing well, it's those where there is what is called participatory governance, which means there is a balance between the national authorities making the recommendations, making policies, putting the policies into practice, and at the same time, there is a non-governmental sector, businesses, civil society, the media, being able to understand what government is doing, contributing to these policies in the first place, but also exercising effective oversight. And this obviously cannot happen if one side, which is on your right side, does not have access to information to understand what is actually happening.
The team lead at the Center for Maritime Law and Security, SEMLAWS Africa, Dr. Kamaldeen Ali, corroborated this objective.
Yeah, it requires a certain level of digital infrastructure to be able to have information available. So that has to be looked into to make sure that there is requisite digital infrastructure to host the information and to make it available. It requires a certain level of technical expertise or personnel to be dedicated to the job of making information available. So again, it may require some recruitment, some refresher training, and certain level of expertise at the ministry and the Fisheries Commission so that can happen.
Over the course of the last week, the Ship Owners and Agents Association of Ghana, SOAAG, celebrated its 30th anniversary with its stakeholders. SOAAG for 30 years has served as a central organization in the country for companies and corporations engaged in the shipping business. The association is made up of 17 shipping companies who operate in Ghana. Executive member of SOAAG, Adamimo Rayana, stated the association's resolve to rely on effective dialogue to arrive at mutually beneficial solutions with its stakeholders.
Our doors are always open, and we are ever ready to meet with you to find solutions to issues when the need arises. In difficult times, we have also opted for dialogue and negotiations that have been mutually beneficial, and we hereby entreat all to stick to this formula. As we always say in SOAAG, it's dialogue, dialogue, and dialogue.
The stakeholders present shared messages of goodwill.
Of course, the two ports of Tema and Takoradi are older than 30 years. So that means that GPHA or the ports have been with SOAAG from the beginning of their journey. And we would like to say that we've had a very good working relationship with SOAAG, and we continue to look forward for even better relationships.
We'd like to say congratulations, and we wish you well in your future endeavors.
All right, so those were happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. Indeed, we are now going for some international port and shipping news.
As the global maritime industry embarks on a decarbonization journey, a recent survey conducted among industry stakeholders has revealed that the path towards decarbonization will be complex, with a wide range of fuels in the mix through 2050. The survey respondents expect their fleets to run on multiple types of fuel well into the future, indicating that the transition towards a low-carbon future will not be straightforward. The Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, the Global Maritime Forum, and the Maersk McKinney Moller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping carried out the survey of 29 shipping companies with analytical support provided by McKinsey. The respondents own and operate fleets including container ships, tankers, dry bulkers, gas carriers, car carriers, cruise ships, tugs, and offshore vessels, comprising roughly 20% of the world's total capacity. Port of Aberdeen has revealed its commitment to invest £55 million over the next 10 years to become the UK's first net zero port by 2040. The port is targeting net zero emissions from vessels visiting the port, as well as the port's own operations by 2040. This ambitious target is at the core of the Port of Aberdeen's net zero strategy, with focuses on collaborating with stakeholders across the private and public sectors to reduce emissions in the port, facilitate future low-carbon fuels, and support the energy transition.
All right, so those were some international port and shipping news. We're now going for the phrase or word of the day. Remember, the phrase or word of the day has been fashioned to bring you up to speed with the jargons and terminologies we use in the shipping industry. And today's word is maritime decarbonization. Maritime decarbonization.
Maritime decarbonization is the process of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the global maritime sector, with an overall goal of placing the sector on a pathway that limits global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Emissions reduction actions for the maritime sector includes the use of clean and efficient fuels, exhaust treatment, and carbon capture.
All right, so you're welcome back. Indeed, there are some unscrupulous persons who on social media try to create pages using the names of prominent people. And one such person that has fallen victim to this activity is the Director General of the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, Mr. Michael Luguje. And some people have purportedly created, not purportedly, indeed, they have created a page on Facebook using his name, pretending to be him, and deceiving the unsuspecting public and carrying out all forms of nefarious activities, just trying to perhaps elicit some form of funds or some material stuff from, these unsuspecting members of the public. And so that's a disclaimer there. We're warning the general public to be wary of such unscrupulous people who would go all length to use the names of other people, well-meaning citizens of the country, to defraud you. And so just beware that the Director General of the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority doesn't operate, he doesn't have a Facebook account completely. He doesn't have a Facebook account, and so you don't have to fall victim to this particular, stunt that's being pulled by such unscrupulous people. All right, so we are going to zoom into our discussion proper tonight, and tonight we are taking a look at transparency in our fisheries sector in Ghana and our story so far. And this comes on the back of the report. You saw the story there that was launched in the course of the week by the Fisheries Transparency Initiative alongside SEMLAW, that's the Center for Maritime Security and Law, and indeed the Center for Coastal Management of the University of Cape Coast. They have identified some deficits in terms of information flow, and we just want to examine how transparent we have become since we started, maximizing the potential of the fisheries sector, whether we indeed are even maximizing the potential or what we need to do to make the most of the sector. And so we've assembled a very beautiful team tonight, a strong and powerful one at that, to do justice to the topic. With me in the studios tonight is Mr. Nelson Atanga Ayamdo, who is the team lead for training and partnerships at SEMLAW. He's in the studios with us. Good evening, Mr. Ayamdo, and welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Also joining us via Zoom is Sven Beeman. Sven Beeman is the Executive Director of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, and he's based in Seychelles. He is joining us via Zoom. I'm told he's already, online. If you can hear me, Sven, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Kennedy. It's a pleasure
Great.
to be with you.
Great, good to have you. And we'll also be joined via Zoom by Professor Dennis Ahito, who is the director. He is the director at the Center for Coastal Management at the University of Cape Coast. He has an itinerary tonight. He's traveling out of the country, but opted to join us, and so he'll be joining us via Zoom. The team is trying to make contact with him. As soon as they do, we will bring him online, introduce him, and then we shall, get the discussion underway. But let me go to Ven, all the way in Seychelles, and tell us all about the Fisheries Transparency Initiative and what you've been doing, all this while.
Sure, my pleasure. So the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, or what is often referred to by its abbreviation FITI, is a global partnership that supports coastal states to increase access to information about a country's marine fishery sector. The necessity for such an initiative is due to the fact that when you look at other natural resource sectors, such as oil, gas, and mining, and forestry, governments in fisheries around the world do not publish even basic information about the status of the sector. So for the public, it's very difficult to answer very basic questions such as how healthy are the fish stocks? Who is allowed to fish in our country's waters? How much money is the government making from selling fishing rights? So we're very pleased that in the FITI, we already have 8 countries where the government made a public commitment to increase transparency in fisheries by implementing the FITI. So if you look, for example, at the Seychelles, where I'm currently based, or in Mauritania, over the last 2 or 3 years, these countries have implemented the FITI, and the amount of information that is now publicly accessible has significantly increased. All of the questions that I just mentioned can easily be answered. You can download contracts that the government has signed with other countries, with other foreign entities, to understand what is in these contracts, what is the regulation that is coming out of these contracts. So in addition to Seychelles and Mauritania, we are expecting similar information in the public domain from countries like Ecuador, Capo Verde, Madagascar by the end of this year. And we're also supporting Guinea, Senegal, and Sao Tome and Principe to start this process of increasing public access to information in the public domain.
Awesome. So tell us, why do you think that transparency is very key in the administration or governance of fisheries, in our part of the world?
Yeah, I would not say just in your part or in our part of the world. I think this is a global aspect, because unlike gold and oil and diamonds, which are obviously very important to Ghana, fish is a renewable resource. So in theory, we can fish indefinitely. But what we've seen over the last 40 years is that commercial fish stocks are being depleted. We are now looking at almost 1/3 of all commercial fish stocks being fished at an unsustainable biological level. Now that number, that 35%, has tripled in the last 40 years. So that is obviously a worrying situation. But at the same time, we also see that if these fish stocks are managed well, then we can maintain them at a good level or even rebuild some of those stocks that are replenished. So one way to do this is to entrust the government with the task to manage fisheries for the well-being of its people. So the government is setting priorities. From these priorities, it determines public policies, and then it implements the public policies. So it becomes evident why public access to information is so important. And let me give you a few concrete examples. So there is overwhelming evidence that if you look at the fish stocks that are healthy, the single most important aspect of sustainable management of fisheries is an inclusive policy making, which means it's not just the government making these decisions, but it is an inclusive process that also gets the feedback and the input from other stakeholders, including the business community, including civil society organization, etc. But these actors, these non-governmental actors, obviously cannot participate effectively in such an inclusive process if they don't know what's happening in the sector in the first place. So without access to information, their input and their role is significantly diminished. You can also look at the business. If you want to invest in a country like Ghana, and you don't know what is the situation of the various fish stocks, what are the regulations that you have to observe, who are your competitors, what is the trend of stocks, is it getting better, is it getting worse, etc. There's almost no way for you to calculate a business case to make a sound business decision whether you want to invest in the sector or not. And obviously, a third point is we entrust governments to manage the sector in the best interest of its people, but it is a core principle of democracy, it's a core principle of governance that there needs to be also checks and balances. And again, if we want to include non-governmental actors in this governance balance, on the one side you have the decision making on the governments, and on the other side you have effective oversight, then obviously again their role and this possibility cannot happen if they don't know what's happening in the sector.
Right. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much indeed, Ven. I'll be coming back to you. But let me announce that we have managed to get Professor Ahito on the line. He is the director at the Center for Coastal Management at the University of Cape Coast. He's joined us. But let me come in the studios and ask Mr. Ayamdo. You seem, Semlos, so to speak, if I say you, I mean Semlos, yes, seem to place premium on fisheries development in recent times. I just want you to tell me some of the strides you've made so far and what role Semlos actually played as far as the recent report that was launched is concerned.
Right. As a center that seeks to pioneer research in maritime affairs and maritime issues, we cannot miss out on the issues happening in the fisheries. You would know that the importance of fisheries in this country is not a light issue. I'm sure we do know of the percentage of people who are directly dependent on the fisheries for their livelihoods. We conservatively estimate that we're about 10% of the population, right? So apart from persons who are dependent on the fisheries for their livelihoods, you also have the issues of food security, of food, right? We eat a lot of fish in this country, and I believe that you have eaten fish this morning, at least. So with these issues, there's no way that we can ignore developments and issues in the fisheries. Now, as to some of the things that we have done, so this is not the only one that we have partnered with FITI to launch this report.
Yeah.
In the past, we were involved in at least the, training fishery observers that will be deployed on vessels that will go to sea. This is sometime around 2017, and then we trained at least about 100 or possibly more fishery observers for deployment on fishery vessels. We are still continuing with activities. We are currently conducting a study on transparency and accountability mechanisms in the fisheries in Ghana and then 3 other West African countries. So we'll continue to play roles and then investigate and do things of interest in the fisheries sector.
Yeah, so what role did you play in this particular report that was launched last week? Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of what we did, this is a report that would definitely require somebody within Ghana to participate in. So for us, for our role, we had to be we had to interface between FITI and the ministry. We had to validate the criteria with FITI that was used to assess and conduct the report. We had to also confirm the data. Right. You would have heard the VN say that some of the data, at least when we come to the report, that some of the things that we found, that yes, there was data on some of the criteria, but it was not available. Now, how was it not available? We would have to bring that on board, that although we have this data, it is not, so that the issue of deficiency would not be an issue that would linger in the report.
All right, so let me go to Prof. Prof, good evening, sir, if you can hear me.
Yeah, good evening.
Absolutely.
And my apologies to you for not being at the studio.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because of other officials.
We appreciate the fact that you have decided to oblige us. Yes, we are grateful. I just want you to briefly tell us about the Center for Coastal Management. That's the World Bank Center for Excellence, Africa Center for Excellence in Coastal Resilience, and you are director at the CCM, Center for Coastal Management, University of Cape Coast. Tell us about you, this particular center and what you've been doing so far, and how you are involved in this particular thing as far as the scheme of things is concerned.
Right. Thank you, Ken, for the question. The Center for Coastal Management is, as you rightly noted, is a center of excellence. It's actually a regional center of excellence supported by several development partners. Of course, the World Bank is the lead institution. So as a university center, we are actually in the forefront of pioneering and supporting broad-based capacity development in the area of training masters and PhD students in not just fishery science, but also recently we've included the blue economy, governance and social resilience. We also do training coastal management, coastal governance, broad-based capacity development, not just for young professionals, but also for those within the working space. We are a think tank institution that is really involved in not just fisheries issues, but broad-based areas within the sector, maritime sector broadly. And we are involved in policy advocacy on climate change, biodiversity, on fisheries, on marine spatial planning, and a whole host of other areas, including coastal engineering. We were set up 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and have been in the forefront of supporting also continental-wide policy development on fisheries and aquaculture, particularly in partnership with the African Union. So these are just snippets of what we do. But in terms of how we are engaged with SEMLOS,
yes,
SEMLOS and CCM is partnering in this particular initiative where we're trying to provide knowledge and capacity development and also some policy advocacy around 6 thematic areas supported through the US State Department, through the American Embassy here. And let me quickly, with your permission, highlight that the 6 packages actually involve strategic engagement for greater impact, where we are providing a framework for engaging and partnering with key stakeholders within the sector, where we hope that we can align the project activities with issues that are confronting the sector for greater fisheries transparency. The second area has to do with advocacy for fisheries transparency, looking at paradigm shifts towards more sustainable fisheries management and livelihoods. The third area, we're looking at institutional transformation for accountability and effective enforcement. And then also we're looking at the fourth area, industrial capacity enhancement and repositioning the sector for local ownership. You know, the whole issue concerning the fronting and many other issues, which we think that ownership should move more towards locals is one key area. And then the fifth area, we're looking at research and data for policy change. And of course, lastly, the monitoring evaluation. And we're doing this across 7 countries in the Gulf of Guinea. The core countries include Ghana, Mauritania, Senegal, but of course, there are additional countries to do with Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, and Sierra Leone. So broadly, this is a framework within which we are engaging with SEMLOS.
All right, so where do we stand as far as the fisheries sector is concerned as a country? I know you've done some significant work, assessing, our governance as far as the fisheries sector is concerned. I just wanted to paint a picture and tell us where we stand now. Are we doing well? Where have we done well? Where do we need to perhaps, double our steps in order to be able to stand on an even keel?
Yeah, when you talk about the fishery sector, it's actually a broad sector. So we would have to narrow down specifically what we referring to. So the fishery sector is we're talking about, well, you may want to look at whether you're talking about the inland sector or the marine sector. But of course, where the challenges has really been, which is discussed nationally, largely has to do with the marine sector. Obviously, the inland sector also is bedeviled with its own issues. But given that majority of our fish stocks come from the marine capture fisheries, we tend to focus our attention as a country in terms of policy development, in terms of research and scientific data collection and broad-based fisheries management, because it's even reflected in the fisheries management planning, where we see that most of the planning is focused on the marine sector as opposed to the inland sector. So within the marine sector, we're looking at the small-scale fisheries, we're looking at the artisanal sector, which is actually the largest sector in terms of the proportion of people who are engaged in the sector. We're talking about 70% of Ghanaians fishers who are 70% involved in that sector.
Yes.
And then we're looking at also the industrial sector and then, of course, the industrial sector. But where the problem largely is with the artisanal small-scale sector, because 70% of the production of what we rely on as a country usually come from the artisanal sector, who largely depend on, the pelagic stocks. And these are mid-water stocks which are within our inshore areas. The sector is bedeviled by so many challenges. There are issues of capacity deficits. There are issues of data quality. There are issues of financing in terms of financial resources to administer effectively any fisheries management, proper fisheries management schemes. There are issues, natural factors to do with climate change, which we hardly want to talk about, but obviously that also seems to have a problem. In terms of fisheries data collection, that is really, one of the fundamental challenges. We, as a country, have relied heavily on collecting fisheries-dependent data, which focuses largely on effort and catch. However, the need to collect other important aquatic environmental parameters, to do environmental data, also data on the fish stock populations, abundance, and so on and so forth, which we call the fisheries independent data, are to a large extent not collected. We would need the fisheries independent data to be able to validate whatever data we are getting from the Fisheries Commission in terms of the fish, in terms of the effort and catch data, so that we can make the right decisions for our sector. Unfortunately, these are not happening. There are clear guidance that the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries have outlined in terms of how our data procedures, data collection procedures must be done and curated for decisions. Unfortunately, we are not able to do that, but there are a plethora of problems and challenges that do not allow this to happen.
All right, Prof. Thank you very much indeed. I'll be coming back to you. Let me go to Sven and find out from you what seems to be the common challenge in terms of information accessibility and availability, on the global stage as far as the fishery sector is concerned. And then you can also zero in to the West African sub-region.
Yeah, thanks, Kennedy. So what we see is really that there is a paradigm shift needed when it comes to transparency. As I mentioned a bit earlier, compared to other natural resource sector, transparency really, fisheries has really stayed out of the transparency limelight. We've been talking about government information in the public domain since almost 20 years now for oil, gas, and mining. In fact, if you look at Ghana, Ghana is a member of the extractive industry transparency initiative since, I believe it's 2007. So the general public in Ghana can get information about how much money the government is making from mining activities, from oil activities, since 16 years now. But it's not happening in fisheries. So I think governments really need to understand that the expectations have changed, that their values and benefits for sharing information proactively, so that this does not become an aspect of constantly asking governments to share information, but that they are proactively providing information in the public domain, which, to be quite frank, should also be the case in Ghana. I mean, Ghana has a Right to Information Act since 2019, and before the show, I went online and had a look at the act, and one of the key principles is the proactive disclosure of information to the general public. So we're not there yet. We're still working with many governments around the world where they feel we share the information when somebody comes and asks, and we need a paradigm shift from a reactive model to a more proactive model, because at the end of the day, this is also from just an operational point of view very positive for governments, because instead of constantly answering information requests, they can proactively provide the information in the public domain for everybody to see. I think another factor that is now becoming less of an issue, but it has been over the last few years, is there are many different views on what transparency actually means, transparency in fisheries. And when we started with the FITI, that was one of the core questions. What is it actually that we mean when we are asking governments to be transparent? What kind of information do we want governments to make publicly available? So that uncertainty is now clarified, because the FITI standard, which is kind of the rule book for fisheries transparency around the world, clearly says this is what are the expectations for governments to make publicly available. But still, some governments are not aware of this, and others believe that transparency means you have to reach a certain level to be seen as transparent, or to be part of a transparency initiative. And quite frankly, this is a wrong perception. And this is one thing that we're constantly trying to make clear and advocate around the world, that transparency in fisheries, the way we see it and the way it is implemented by the countries that I mentioned earlier, basically means governments need to publish the information they have and be transparent about the challenges that exist and the gaps that exist. So in the case, for example, of the Seychelles, they are publishing information about fisheries in the public domain since 3 years now, and has significantly improved. But that doesn't mean there are no gaps, especially when it comes to small-scale fisheries. So that is openly acknowledged, and then countries are working on closing these gaps over time. So there is a misunderstanding. There's also the need for changing a bit the mindset from reactive to proactive. But we also have to be very clear. There are also administrations that do not want to share information in the public domain because it will put them under public scrutiny, and they are not keen on doing so for a number of reasons.
All right. So, are you able to share with us examples of countries that have adopted an open approach in terms of fisheries information, where it is very easy to access information on the fisheries sector, and what advantages do they have that the other countries, including Ghana, where it's quite difficult to access information on the sector, do not enjoy?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, and I said it also during last week when I was actually in Ghana, is that the FITI is not asking governments to do something that they are not supposed to do in the first place. I mean, imagine you are the shareholder of a company. You will not get access to every single accounting transaction, but you do get information on an annual basis how the company is doing from a financial aspect. And this kind of big picture information, number of vessels, number of contracts, stock assessments, subsidies, information on beneficial ownership, these big areas of fisheries management, this is what the FITI is trying to work with governments to make it increasingly publicly available. So what we're seeing from the countries that are already implementing the FITI is, I think, foremost, a huge trust dividend, not only from international partners, but also from national stakeholders, because the government is clearly putting information online. It's clearly showing here are the gaps. So this is something that instills trust in what the government is doing, because they are sharing all this information openly. And that basically means if you have questions about the data, you can request more information or an update. In the case of Ghana, we discussed this also this week during the workshops, also the workshops with the media. There's quite a bit of focus at the moment in Ghana on combating IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And the government has made several commitments in this regard. So what is lacking is basically the information underneath, because you cannot combat IUU fishing without public access to a certain type of information, such as a vessel registry, license information, ownership information, etc. So again, the FITI, as an internationally recognized framework, would give Ghana the boost to make sure that whatever it's doing regarding combating IUU fishing is complemented by a more broader aspect of transparency in the fisheries sector. And it does attract positive feedback, obviously, also from the business community. So, for example, in the case of Mauritania, we have just completed our first validation process. A validation in the FITI is basically a global quality assurance process. So that basically means when countries join the FITI, regularly they will be reviewed to make sure that everybody is playing according to the same rules and the same standards, and that we don't have any free riders in the FITI. So that validation showed a huge increase in the public accessibility on websites, and that's very positively acknowledged. And while there are some areas that the country needs to work on, one of the aspects that came out of this that addresses your question, Kennedy, is that multiple stakeholders raised that the business climate, the investment climate in Mauritania's fishery sector has significantly improved. Because if you want to do business, it's
right.
You feel it's very risky if you don't know what's happening in the sector.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. Don't leave us. We'll come back to you. But let me come to the studios. During the launch, Mr. Ayamdo, of the report, what were some of the key issues that came up in the findings?
Okay, so the findings, it found overall, the finding
just the key ones.
Yes, overall, yes. The finding was that Ghana was not deficient in information.
Okay.
So, yes, our ministry, our Fisheries Commission, they do take data.
Right.
There is information. However, that information was either outdated, not up to date.
Okay.
Or if it was available, then it was not accurate. There were a number of instances. On the Fisheries Commission's website, you would find the list of vessels.
Right.
But that information is only up till June 2022. Right. We are way into the first quarter of the year.
Yes.
So that's just an instance that yes, we do keep some information, but that information may not be accurate or may not be updated. But overall, we do have fishery management information that is available online. Let's emphasize that this report is only an online or just an online assessment of fisheries management information. So that if it is not available online, then the advocacy and then the encouragement is that it should be put online. It should be put online not just because it has to be put online, but that it enhances transparency in fisheries management.
Yes.
What will that be? It requires that it must be accurate. It should be updated. It should also be available in a usable form.
Right. Okay, so I just want to find you, have you been able to draw government's attention or the powers that be to some of these anomalies and perhaps pep them up to be able to, do the right things?
Yes, so at the launch, the stakeholders, in this case, the ministry,
the deputy minister,
yes, as well as the Fisheries Commission, were actively involved.
Yes.
And then it was quite encouraging that, yes, they did accept the report. And then they did promise, the promise was that they would work with us to see how we can implement the recommendations and then make Ghana a FITI compliant country. So the expectation is that in the coming days, we would work with the ministry and the Fisheries Commission in undertaking the recommendations that we identified.
I think that the three of you, when I say the three of you, FITI, that's a Fisheries Transparency Initiative, Center for Coastal Management, and SEMLAWS Africa, seems to be resolute in your conviction. You are united in your conviction that transparency is very key in terms of administering properly and effectively the fisheries sector in our country. Why do you think that, it's absolutely imperative or necessary for there to be some element of transparency?
The issue of transparency, in fact, it's not just an ideal. It has even attained a constitutional status. So when we look at Article 21 of our Constitution, one of the rights that the Constitution embodies is that there should be information. Now, there is also, based on that, there is also the Freedom of Information Act, which requires that the state would make information available.
Absolutely.
How would the citizen participate in governance without information? So the imperative is that, yes, transparency is an imperative for good governance, and other for the citizens and stakeholders to participate in good governance. Then there is a need for information. So not just information, but information that would meet the test of it being available, it being accurate, and it being adequate.
All right. Okay, let me go to Prof. Ahito and I'll find out from you, Prof. Day 2 of this particular thing. I was there when you organized the training program for media personnel. That was on the distant water fishing vessels. Oh, Prof is off. Okay, all right. All right. Once we get him, I would pose that question to him. But let me come back to you, Mr. Ayamdo, and trying to find out from you. Why you think that it was very important for you to come together and perhaps bring the media, for that particular training program, which I was privileged to be part of, on the distant water fishing vessels. Yeah.
Right. So this is a project that, as Prof has already indicated, the scope of the project and then the packages.
Yeah.
We would have to bring the visibility to the issue of distant water vessels. Right. It's the media that would bring this issue up. Now, the purpose was to then train the media on what distant water fishes vessels are in order to build their capacity to bring up the issue.
Yes.
Once the media is trained, then they are able to understand the nuances of the problem. Without the media, it will be very difficult to champion and advocate for the issues that bedevil the country's fisheries as a result of the malign effects of foreign distant water vessels.
Yes.
So yes, the media is a very good partner in this endeavor.
Yes.
And that is the reason why we had to partner with CCM to embark on this training. And I believe that as a participant, you were a bit enlightened as to some of the issues that you probably did not know.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, let me go to Ven. Ven, during your presentation on the day, that was day 2, when the training program was organized for the media personnel, you made mention of the multi-purpose approach of transparency in the fisheries. Can you expatiate on this particular one? What do you mean by that when you say there should be a multi-purpose approach for transparency in the fisheries sector? Oh, okay. I understand we don't have him yet. He's also gone off. We are having some technical challenges with the folks we have online. Prof. Ahito is not there, and Ven is also off. I'm sure the team is trying to see if they can get them back, and then we'll continue with them. But let me come to Mr. Ayamdo in the studios and find out from you. You brought the media up to speed with the issues that we have. I was part of it, like I said. And then, you are trying to get us to perhaps be quite vibrant, in terms of drawing the powers that be's attention to issues affecting the sector, issues impacting negatively on the fisheries sector and all that. I just want to find out from you why you think that it is important that if we are those that are, the watchdogs, and we are able to bring the issues up and the right strings are not pulled in order to get, the powers that be to act on them. Won't we be operating perhaps maybe in a vacuum?
You want to be operating in a vacuum. So apart from the media training to bring visibility and to bring them up to speed on these issues, we're also working with the ministry, and then in fact the FITI report launch is also one of the steps that would seek to address the issue of distant water vessels.
Right.
There are a number of measures that at least that the government or the ministry has already done, or that as a country that we have done, that would in the future resolve the issue. One of them has to do with the issues of beneficial ownership, because the problem of distant water vessels has largely to do with fronting.
Yes.
Now with beneficial ownership regime now, which requires publication, the disclosure, and all the things that come with it. Now, it will be difficult at a point to now front for these vessels, so that without being a Ghanaian, if you are the beneficial owner of a vessel that is going to fish in our waters, you won't be able to. You won't be able to have a license. But again, that depends on fully implementing and regulating the issue of beneficial ownership.
Yes.
Which, again, there are steps.
Beneficial ownership.
Ownership.
Okay. Tell us when you say beneficial ownership.
Beneficial ownership. All right. So what happened? What the issue is that In order to have a efficient vessel in Ghana or a license, it's an issue reserved for Ghanaians, largely reserved for Ghanaians.
Absolutely.
Now, but because of the cost and other factors, you'd have a lot of foreigners who bring in vessels. Then they get Ghanaians to fund for these foreigners.
Yes.
The vessel is licensed as a Ghanaian vessel or owned by a Ghanaian.
Ghanaian, yeah.
The vessel operates and gets a license as a Ghanaian vessel.
Yeah.
But in reality, the person who is at the background, the person who is the ultimate beneficiary of the proceeds is not a Ghanaian.
Right.
It is not that person, that Ghanaian who is on paper.
Okay.
Right. So beneficial ownership now requires that in registering or incorporating a company that would be applying for the registration of the vessel, fishing vessel, or applying for a license, you would have to first of all declare who is the beneficial owner of that vessel.
Right.
So yes, so these are the part of the steps that are being taken to curtail the issues of distant water fleets that's within our waters.
Right, right. Okay, let me go to Prof. Aito. I understand we have him. I'll take him briefly, and then we will come back and go for a break. And then when we come back, we'll do the last bit, and then we would wrap up. Prof, we're glad to have you back. I understand we lost you at some point. I just want to find out from you, during the day two, in Captain Dr. Kamaldeen's submission or presentation, he made mention of the fact, and he was quite explicit about the fact that our fish stocks are depleting, and that there's a threat to the industry. I just want to find out from you, what do you think we should be doing to ameliorate this particular situation? Okay, I think Prof, we still don't have him, but we'll go for a break. When we return, we'll continue the discussion. Please do stay with us.
Every now and again, Goil makes good things happen. This time, Goil has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goil Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. Goil Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. Goil Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with Goil Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. Goil has that sorted. Goil, good energy.
Electricity, pay your taxes. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is. You still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse.
Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risk Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse. And my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance motor policy. My goods are on the IC, covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance. Oh, Ajima, tell him more.
As a road contractor, I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance for the projects and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
MPS Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
Business and life can be like the sea sometimes. Sometimes serene, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, and at times it brings the unexpected. However it is like, trust Phoenix Insurance for your home, car, business, and marine insurance needs. Call 0302 246 319 or 0243 690 492.
At Phoenix, you experience a delightful service delivered with wisdom.
All right, so welcome back. Tonight we are discussing transparency in the fisheries sector, fisheries administration, and the Ghana story so far. And with me in the studios is Mr. Nelson Atanga Ayamdo, who is the team lead in charge of training and partnerships at the Center for Maritime Law and Security, that's SEMLOS Africa. Also joining us via Zoom is Van Beeman, who is the Executive Director of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative based in the Seychelles. And also joining us via Zoom is Professor Dennis Ahito, who is the Director of the Center for Coastal Management at the University of Cape Coast. We're still trying to work the lines and then get them on via Zoom, because I understand we've lost them. We haven't been able to get them back. But let me come to the studios and to Mr. Ayamdo and find out from you whether...
Hello?
Just try to... Okay. Prof, are you back?
We're both
Yes,
back,
I'm online, please.
Okay.
I'm online.
All right, okay. I thought we hadn't gotten you back. Thank you very much.
I've been online throughout. I think the problem is coming from your
From
end.
our end, yes. My team actually confirmed that the problem is ours. It's coming from our end. Thank you very much. I was saying that during the presentation on that day, Prof. Dr. Kamaldeen made mention of the fact that, yes, our fish stocks are depleting. I just want to find out from you whether you can proffer some solutions on how we can get this issue remedied.
Of course, there are a number of compelling opportunities that we have, which we can use to revert the situation. We need to, first of all, reduce efforts, the number of fishermen and fishers. And not just that, we need to reduce the number of vessels that can allow us to fish sustainably. We also need to look at the issue of fishery subsidies. You know, it's one thing that has bedeviled the country, even though we do not want to talk about it. If you look at the investments that are going into fishery subsidies, it's something that we at the Center for Coastal Management have proposed for progressive reduction of premix fuel to fishers so that they can those resources can be channeled into broader coastal management interventions within the communities. Obviously, the issue of sustainable alternative livelihoods have also been spoken about. You know, there is a strong and urgent need for fishers to begin looking at other sources of incomes rather than looking at fishing as the major, livelihood option. Overcapacity of fleets has really been one of the major challenges. However, we should also point to the numerous illegal fishing practices, and obviously being one of the key issues of which IUU, the impact of distant water fishing fleets. So there's a broader need for enforcement and regulation of the way and manner we are managing the fisheries, which currently is quite poor. So these are some interventions that we need to look at. But ultimately, the FAO Code of Conduct, if you read the paragraph 6.4, has stated clearly that the conservation and management of fisheries must be based on the best scientific knowledge that is available at any point in time. You know, unfortunately, if you look at our fisheries institution, in as much as efforts are being made to collect data, the data that we have are not sufficient to be able to make any effective decisions in terms of managing our fish stocks. Because if you want to effectively manage fisheries, we need to base on data that is of high quality, in order to inform whatever decision that we are making in terms of what, where, and even how much of the stock that must be captured. And so these are issues that we need to look at. Obviously, we also need to look at developing the value chain. If we are reducing the number of fishers, can we also look at management measures that feeds into value chain development in terms of processing post-harvest to reduce post-harvest losses, of the fish stock. But by and large, I think the issue also goes beyond just the data and the commitments by government to put in place measures to address this issue. We need to look at broader marine spatial planning opportunities where, within the context of the blue economy, we are also able to identify other areas where fishermen could play a role. So on the part of government, I think the fisheries management plan has been put in place. The major challenge is the resources to implement it. And so more investments in the implementation of the fisheries management plan. I mean, the new one currently in full force, which is also gazetted, is running to, I think, 2025. It just came into force last year. We need to significantly look for resources to finance it. And I think government must make a lot more commitment at that, so that we can limit the fishing efforts, optimize economic and social, obviously ecological sustainability of capture fisheries. So these are some solutions, even though it will not come that easy.
Yeah.
We need to also monitor the environment of our waters. The illegal mining activities are obviously also impacting negatively on our fish stocks. If you look at all that is happening in the country, most of these pollution, from heavy metals, from effluents from agricultural activities and other mining activities are eventually ending up in the marine environment. And these are all sources of environmental impact on our stocks that we need to look at. So monitoring and enforcement is key. And financing of the sector is other.
Right, Prof. Before we allow you to go, finally, I just want you to tell us how public and private sector players can collaborate, to ensure a very sustainable fisheries sector for our country.
I think my colleague Nelson Ayamdo has actually given a very vivid account in terms of beneficial ownership. Where the local people pretend to be involved in the fishing sector, when in actual fact it's foreigners who are dominating the sector. And largely because the locals do not have the capacity in terms of the financial muscle to be able to enter into the sector. The licensing regimes are quite expensive, as has been noted. Obviously, running the industry in terms of capacity development, and even the captains, are not from our countries. So where the private sector comes in response to your question, is how do we look at modalities that effectively supports the local people to lead the industry, as opposed to having foreigners who come to fly our flags, within the sector. So the private sector could provide some resources and finance local people, because that is the only way I think that the private sector could play a role in terms of getting nationals into the sector. There's really a lot of money in fishing activities. If you look at the data, you realize that the fisheries itself is a renewable resource compared to gold or oil and all that, which are non-renewable.
Yeah.
If we are able to manage the fish stock sustainably, it will be there in perpetuity. You don't need too many fishermen. We just need to put in place very prudent management measures, which have been tried and tested elsewhere. and has brought huge economic benefits to many countries in Norway, in the US, and many other developing countries. Even in North African countries, in Egypt, in Morocco, and all they've really made it economically.
Yeah.
Using fisheries as an entry point to the blue economy, harnessing the potential of the blue economy. So I think the private sector certainly have a role to play in terms of how they support local industries and local people and also academia to push this issue forward.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Prof. We are deeply grateful to you for obliging us today. You have a very tight itinerary. You're traveling out of the country, but you took time off to join us for this discussion. We are deeply grateful to you, and I am certain that in future we'll have more deeper discussion on this particular issue. We're grateful to you. Professor Dennis Aito is the Director at the Center for Coastal Management, University of Cape Coast. We are grateful to you, Prof. Let me come to Ven. If you can hear me, Ven, I just want to find out from you briefly whether you have any recommendations for Ghana in terms of the administration of the fisheries sector, and why you think it's important for Ghana to join FITI.
Yes. So in the report that we've published last week, there were a few recommendations that we put together in collaboration with SEMLOS Africa and our peer reviewers. And there are some recommendations that I would say are basically low-hanging fruits. What we've seen in the report is that while there is a significant deficit of transparency when it comes to Ghana's fisheries, the report also showed that Ghana is not data deficient. So that means the Fisheries Administration has a lot of information, but it's not publicly accessible. And just to echo on what Nelson said earlier about the importance of online information, if you look at the global average, we have now 60% of all the people living on this planet access the internet on a regular basis. In Ghana, it's even higher. In Ghana, it is 69%. So almost 7 out of 10 people in Ghana access the internet on a regular basis. So the internet is the way to provide and distribute information to the people of Ghana. So if one of the recommendations that our report made is to make the information that the authorities already have publicly available. One of the points that I was asked while I was in Ghana last week, and that echoes a little bit your question, Kennedy, what should be done now, was the aspect of the closed fishing season. Now, this is a policy measure that the government has put in place. And the question that was asked to me, and I think others, was, is it working? Now, it's certainly not our job to say whether certain management aspects are working in a particular country. But even if I wanted to, I could not answer this particular question, because the government has reports that look at how successful was the closed fishing season on the biodiversity of the targeted fish species. So has it helped to recover the fish stock? And what were the impacts from a socioeconomic point of view on the fishers? But that report is not publicly available. So if you want to understand whether the government is heading in the right direction, you can't, because the information that the government has is not publicly available. So a recommendation is clearly to make this information publicly available, upload it, find a single point of information where people can go to. We found it a bit confusing that there is a website for the Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture Development, and there's a website for the Fisheries Commission. They both have almost a similar structure, yet some of the information is overlapping, some of the information is missing. So if you are a person that wants to understand what's the situation in the sector, it would be beneficial if there would be one single source of data entry. So there are 2 or 3 of those aspects that we believe the authorities in Ghana can rectify very easily. And we were happy that the Deputy Minister acknowledged that the report is a true reflection of the current situation, and also asked SEMLOS FITI and others to help them to improve now. But, and that answers the second part of your question, is transparency is not just about visibility. This is obviously what everybody thinks about when they hear transparency, to make something publicly accessible. But if we have a great website in Ghana, let's say in a year, with all the information publicly available, but the other stakeholders, like the fishing associations, like the business community, like the CSOs in the country, don't understand the data or don't have the ability to use the data and sit together with the government to discuss certain policy measures that they are planning, then this, increased access to information does not lead to better management. And as I said earlier, at the beginning, if you look globally at the stocks that are doing well,
right,
one theme that all have in common is there is an inclusive process on how policies have been made. So that's why we strongly believe that Ghana should join the other West African countries, join the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, because the FITI has this dual aspect of visibility and usability of information at its core, and we believe Ghana will benefit significantly.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Van Beeman, who is Executive Director of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative based in the Seychelles. We thank you so much for joining us this evening for this discussion. We're grateful to you. You also left Ghana over the weekend, and I'm sure you must be tired, but you decided to join us. We are deeply grateful to you. Let me come in studios and find out from Mr. Ayamdo. I just wanted to paint for us a picture of what a successful or a well-managed sustainable fisheries sector looks like, what the benefits would be, and how Ghana can get there. Just briefly, we have barely 2 minutes to go.
All right, so for a sustainable fisheries, we will look at, or what it should look like is that there would be enough fish on our plates today, but not just for today, but that tomorrow we would get fish, that the habitats, fishery habitat, will be protected so that we can continue to get fish.
Right.
And that the livelihoods of the 10% of the population that we estimate that depend on the fisheries will be protected.
Yeah.
And of course, there would be adequate enforcement of fisheries regulation.
Right.
We've said that regulations without or law without enforcement is just like it's advice.
Right.
We don't want it to be that way. So we think that a sustainable fishery should do these things. There should be enough fish. They should protect the habitats, should protect the livelihood of those whose lives are dependent on the fisheries.
Right.
And then there should be adequate enforcement of fishery regulations.
Right. And so what next for SEMLOS?
SEMLOS, yes, we would continue to collaborate and partner with other CSOs, institutions like CCM, and work with the government. In this case, the Ministry and as well as the Commission, in projecting and advocating for improvement in the management of the fishery sector.
All right. I must also commend you for that wonderful training you carried out.
Thank you.
We enjoyed it. It was quite impactful and quite detailed and comprehensive. And the simulation exercise that we undertook there, was also quite good, breaking us into groups. And so this is where I also say thank you to you, Mr. Nelson Atanga Ayamdo, lead in charge of training and partnerships at the Center for Maritime Law and Security Africa, SEMLOS Africa, who also joined us in the studio tonight for this discussion. Remember, tonight we've been taking a look at fisheries transparency in the fisheries administration in Ghana and our story so far. And we've been doing the discussion with Mr. Nelson Atanga Ayamdo from SEMLOS, Mr. Van Beeman from FITI, that's the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, who is in the Seychelles, and then Professor Dennis Ahito, who is from the University of Cape Coast, that's the Center for Coastal Management, CCM. He also joined us via Zoom. And we thank them so much for making a date and for obliging us this evening. Remember, you can watch the brief version of Iron Port on Ghana Television on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. We say a big thanks to our sponsors, Ghana Revenue Authority, GOIL PLC, Serene Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, Meridian Port Services, and indeed Phoenix Insurance Company Limited. Remember, the show is powered by the Ghana Port and Harbours Authority. And next week, God willing, on Sunday, we shall bounce back with another wonderful edition of Iron Port. We entreat you to keep watching the rest of our programs and have a super week ahead. And good evening. My name is Kennedy Mona.